Descent into Darkness, Season 2, A Call of Cthulhu campaign. Hello and welcome back to Death Watch's A Call of Cthulhu campaign, Season 2, Descent into Darkness. I am Travis, I'll be your keeper tonight. And last we left off, our investigators were standing outside the lodge hall of the Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight, determining what they were going to do next. They had recently been contacted by Detective Wayne Nichols to help him solve a murder. But for a moment, before you guys decide what your next move is, we're going to focus on Monroe as he stands outside the lodge hall. It is June in Boston, so it's muggy and warm, although it's still customary for you guys to wear jackets and things of that nature because they're part of how you dress up. Are you wearing your garishly colored?
Yeah.
The one that I have on your token there?
Yeah.
Did I get the colors on that right, by the way? I was trying to do it from memory.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I imagine that the red's more of like a circus ringleader red.
Right.
But yeah.
So in your breast pocket on the inside is a folded letter that you had received some days before coming to the Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight. So let me share that with you real quick. Okay, so this is a letter you received from Jackson Elias. That's dated Thursday, May 5th, 1921. And it reads, Dear Mr. Monroe, I hope that you received my draft on events surrounding a certain pyramid in Peru. I think it will do well once published, despite the omission of key details. I am afraid the full narrative will have to remain solely in the minds of those of us who were there. However, this letter is not about my book. As you know, I have remained in Peru while I work through the editing process, and so I can pull at a few loose threads that still bother me. One thing I have discovered is the identity of the priest who gave the last rites to Gaspar Figueroa, Padre Ramirez, as in Father Ramirez. Not only did he gain Figueroa's journal, but also the golden mask which Figueroa pulled from the pyramid on his fateful visit. The Padre wrote about the visions he saw on its mirrored surface and of a being he sometimes communicated with. His writings took a bizarre turn in the later entries to a degree that I almost gave up translation work. I endured, and with the help of Professor Sanchez, we learned the Padre authored a means to reliably contact the entity. The method is detailed in the translations included with this letter. If you want my advice, take these writings, the translation work, and the mask and throw them in the deepest pit you can find. According to church records, Padre Ramirez traveled into the highlands and was never seen again. On a personal note, I plan to be in Massachusetts this fall, Arkham, Boston, and Salem specifically, all to promote my latest and greatest work of mostly nonfiction. A display of artifacts recovered from the site along with my expose on events might make a powerful event. Wouldn't you agree? Perhaps we can arrange to have dinner and catch up when I get back to the States. Your good friend, Jackson Elias.
All right.
And this actually came with a package, the collected notes of this Padre Ramirez. So I'll share the summary of that with you as well. So this was just like a cover sheet on a journal that's written in Spanish. And but when you got the journal and you flipped through it, it had, like strange diagrams and whatnot drawn in the middle section. And you can see this is in a different handwriting, whoever wrote this. So this is the summary of Padre Ramirez's journals. Upon giving Gaspar Figueroa the last rites and arranging his burial, Padre Ramirez found himself the inheritor of a strange tale, a golden section of worked banding, and a mask-like artifact whose inner plane was mirrored. Ramirez soon discovered that looking into the mirrored surface of the golden mask caused obscure visions of the future or distant places. One such vision described several strangely dressed figures with mules descending from a mountain path towards a partially buried pyramid. And on one occasion, he communed with a strange being by some manner of extrasensory telepathy. In the early days, Ramirez wondered if this was some manner of miracle, but upon his encounter with the entity, he believed he was dealing with a demon, or perhaps the adversary himself. Through a process of experimentation with the mask and careful notes, he found that he could reliably contact the entity. See page 16 through 25 for notes on this process. Who he began to refer to as the Father of Maggots. Ramirez felt it was his personal mission from God to confront and rebuke this Father of Maggots. However, he described how each calling of Father left him drained and weakened. Towards the end, he began to question his faith and so resolved to travel to where he believed the Father of Maggots to be and cast him back to hell.
Okay.
So that was just included with the journal and the full translation as just sort of an abstract of everything that's in there.
Yeah.
Now, this actually counts as what's called a Mythos Tome. So in order to do a full study of it and to learn the spell in there, which is the way to reliably contact the entity within the mask, you would have to sit down with it for a period of time.
Wasn't that what I did during my investigator period?
The spell you learned was your ability to force people to do what you suggest that they do. This is suggesting a way to contact the entity in the mask, whereas before it was kind of random.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think Whitmire still has yet to, or hasn't quite.
He did once, and he made a deal for wealth, right, John?
Yeah. The wealth and power.
You double-crossed him.
But it like took a bit,
did.
Right? Because I seem to remember you like spamming the mask every opportunity, and you keep getting the old man in the corner.
Now, I'm aware that you don't have the mask, but Jackson Elias wasn't aware of that. He picked you as the most likely to keep it.
And he's also pretty friendly with
Monroe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that after I had received his letter, I would have sent back a letter saying that if he wants to hold his gathering, that my museum is always available for him, as many of the artifacts that we brought back are already there. And
yeah, all of you guys have had a correspondence with him, and the mention that he'll be here in the fall. Andrews, you received a letter. Whitmire received a letter. It just didn't talk about the mask or anything. It was some small talk, and he asked you a few questions about what you guys had been up to and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so keep that in mind. Another way a Mythos Tome can be used is it has a rating attached to it. So you can go and reference it if there's some question that you have, and then you roll against that rating, and that determines whether or not the tome actually speaks about it.
Okay.
Granted, this one's pretty low, but just so you know. And there's sanity loss associated for reading the full notes, of course. And it would raise your Mythos skill. All right, so the mechanical stuff out of the way. We now focus over at the good Dr. Andrews, who has some specialized knowledge about medicine and the way procedure works at hospitals and whatnot. So after listening to Detective Wayne Nichols give his story, one thing you know about autopsies or about medicine in general is that despite the scientific basis on which modern medicine is built, the pull to succumb to convenient explanations for causes of death is pretty immense. So much of good doctoring in your experience has been to rely on informed tuition or a good understanding of your patient's history. Sometimes, however, like a young person will die with no discernible cause of death, and an honest answer to tell the bereaved parents or something like that would be, say, well, I don't know how they died. But people don't generally like that. So, a lot of unprincipled doctors, which in your experience is about as highly occurring as the unprincipled in society in general, will just say brain aneurysm or undiagnosed brain aneurysm as being the go-to for why someone young, like, inexplicably dies, Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the same thing with autopsies, because they rely on a narrative, this is what happened, to tell the parents, to tell the husband or the wife, to tell a jury, and in a lot of cases, outlying details are omitted, or if they don't fit the narrative, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that this is how Andrews runs things, but this is what you've experienced being a doctor. is that other doctors aren't above that sort of thing.
Right.
In fact, it's quite common. So that knowledge is in your head. And with that, you're each standing outside of the lodge hall. And I'll open it up to you guys. You have a few hours before you have to be back here for initiation for those who are joining the order. So I guess we could start with Whitmire. Or if you guys wanted to talk to each other to arrange some sort of course of action.
Well, I do have kind of a list of start points that I'll throw out, see what everybody else thinks. So there's the checking out the detective partner's house to try and find that journal. There's also searching the estate, and there we could possibly find more information on that he had written down in the almanacs, if there was any others. There's the sacrifice or ritualistic link. We could start at his cigar shop and see about the building that the college kids that were vandalizing. Or we could go to the sanitarium and try and get some information out of the nephew. What are you guys' thoughts on those, though?
Well, I believe first I must, in the purpose of full disclosure, state that I have, in fact, been acquaintance with Herr Dooley. We met briefly during the investigation of the Corbit house. He was a rather charming man, though a bit crass, but beyond simple acquaintances, I know not of him beyond that. I believe that the sanitarium would be a good visit. I would be willing to go there and meet with, who was it, his nephew?
Yeah, nephew, Charlie Murphy.
Thank you, disembodied voice.
What do you think, Dr. Andrews? Do you concur with Mr. Mueller?
Yes, I think that is the best course of action. Although I'm not necessarily convinced that we'll have a lot of success talking with him.
All right, and
as for me, I believe I'll be heading directly
Lance?
to directly into the library to begin investigating the subject matter of the ritualistic disemboweling and dismembering of the corpse. The way that it was spoken about, with the imagery of how the body was laid out, along with the eye that was scrawled along the wall, being found in other locations as well, suggests that that it's a common practice, and if it is a common practice, then there's sure to be documentation of it somewhere, and where better to find it than in the grand library of the Hermetic Order.
Well,
if not there, then the good Mr. Merriweather also has quite an extensive library of occult traditions that may hold a clue as well.
Before you run off to do that, and what did you uncover at the Corbit house, Mr. Mueller? And does it have? Did you see any links that we could reference between what happened to Mr. Dooley and the Corbit house?
Well, from what I remember, Mr. Dooley had been watching the Corbett house for a good deal of time from his the front entrance of his establishment, and he would swear that there were many strange going-ons from the various occupants of the houses over the years. As for the Corbett house itself, I encountered nothing strange, though me and my companions differ greatly on the actual happenings inside the house. They claimed some sort of supernatural or mystical going-ons, but I never saw such. I chalked it up to perhaps a gas leak or maybe even spores of some sort. That said, while we were investigating it, we did stumble across a tome of some sort, and it went missing. There was also potentially a cult, something to do with an eye.
Yeah, Lance's ears will perk up at the occult tome mentioned and the eye, and begin asking, so when you say it went missing, how exactly did it did it disappear? Did somebody run off with it?
Unfortunately, we do not know. It was left with me for studying, as I have some small knowledge in the area of the occult. And I had gone up to my room. The last things that I remember was sitting in the chair, smoking my pipe. And when I woke up, it was gone. The manager of the hotel claims that I went out at some point for a walk. Perhaps this is true, but I have no memory of it.
Well, I've never experienced this kind of hypnotism from an occult tome. I believe I've heard of these kinds of things.
When you get to my age, memory lapse is not something that is the result of hypnotism, Herr Monroe.
That being said, I would still love to have seen that tome.
I would have as well. It appeared to be old, very old.
Mr. Whitmire, you have some contacts in the underworld that may have perhaps fenced an object of those natures. Perhaps you could drop a question into that realm and see what you can come up with.
So I'd be more than happy to try. Because although I don't... How long ago was this, Mr. Mueller?
That was in about last year, about a year ago.
Okay.
About a year ago, give or take.
All right. Yeah, so I guess I can start there if no one has objections to that.
What, the tracking down of the...
Yeah, see if I could find what that tome or book that you got that you misplaced might have got.
Then perhaps I will venture to another library, as the Hermetic orders will be close to me. Pursue those two avenues separately, perhaps, Mr. R. Monroe?
Perhaps. In the meanwhile, we can just see what the libraries that are at our disposal have.
Gentlemen, I think my contribution would best be following up my reservations about this coroner's report, because there are some issues with it. For whatever reason, he didn't make clear that it's strictly not possible for a boy or even a man to tear people's limbs off without the use of tools. So maybe if I speak with him, I might learn more about why his report has these errors. It's possible that someone encouraged him to write this report this way.
I agree.
So I think that would be the best place for me to start. And now that I've had time to think on it, I'm not sure what benefit I could add to meeting with the nephew. Unfortunately, intellectual disability is a wide spectrum, and I don't know the details, but it's quite possible that we won't be able to communicate with him at all.
Oh, it is very possible, depending on how bad the severity of his break is. But I have some slight knowledge in that, but I believe right now probably the investigation of the ritual itself might work out, as well as the autopsy, to disprove that a man could do such a thing.
After you talk with that coroner, do you want to meet up at that detective's partner's house and help me by asking him some questions while I investigate that journal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then perhaps we meet up and discuss the outcomes of our investigations at dinner tomorrow night as detectives. Yeah.
Now, which detective are you talking about, Whitmire?
I'm talking about the detective's partner, the one, because he said that he saw that journal on the icebox.
Oh, right.
As I want to see. I just need someone to distract him for a while.
I see.
Which is why I quickly decided to be elsewhere. As much as I appreciate the gains from your exploits, I am still a little uncomfortable being a part of them.
Well, if causing a distraction is the objective, then Mr. Monroe is hands down the best pick for that. No offense, Mr. Monroe.
What time
Why
is
would
it,
I take
Kevin?
offense at that? My glorious nature to draw attention to myself is led me down some great paths and has served me well in my profession.
Yes, I can see.
There?
Or a little after, I should say.
So a little afternoon.
So you guys, I guess effectively how we can do it is, for those of you that are joining the order, you'll probably have about enough time to do one thing, unless it's a quick thing, before you're called back to go through the initiation ceremony, and Johann will be able to go on a little bit longer than that.
All right. So would you care to travel to the library with me, Mr. Monroe?
Spending some time with a fellow occult academic would be most delightful.
No. The occult came as a byproduct of my true calling, which is the histories.
History and some of the things of the occult are tied together so tightly that they're indistinguishable.
They are indeed. I would love to pick your brain.
Then I'll be off to speak with the coroner, and us three at least, will meet back here at what time is the ceremony to begin?
It'll be like 5, 6, around there, with a dinner afterwards.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Andrews, until then, auf Wiedersehen.
All right, I guess
I'll just try to put out some feelers to try and gather some information about. I would like to put it out about not just the book, but see if I can, if anybody's heard of any type of rituals like that before, in kind of like killers leaving a signature mark, something like that, right?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so is the book? Did you name the book to them? The Liber Ivonis?
If I could remember that.
Yeah, I think you probably did.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll begin with the good Dr. Andrews as he walks down the street. And how did you want to go about tracking down this Dr. Dicklaw? I suppose there's a couple of different ways you could do it. You could search records for information on his license, and you probably get like his practice, or you could do the phone book, or you could try to establish a contact here in Boston that's in the medical community that could put you in contact with him.
What was this coroner's name again? I think I have it on the...
Dr. Dicklaw.
Yeah.
I should have changed the name. It's one thing to write it, but to say it. Maybe we'll change him to...
Gotta lay it down somehow.
Dicklaw. There we go. That's what we'll say.
Dr. Dicklaw. All right, so how do I go about finding him? So one idea was to go ask Detective Nichols where Dr. Dicklaw's office is kept.
Yeah, you turn to head back into the... Where had he left? Or you see him, we'll say you see him out there in a parking lot they have for adjacent to the building, getting ready to get into his car, and you jog up to catch him. What's up?
That would be something that I would like to kind of rewind and go back to, is that the detective's knowledge that I had encountered Mr. Dooley might be distracting to getting the nephew off of his charges. It might complicate things if we agree on that.
Fair enough.
Dankeschön.
Yeah, so you jog up to him and get his attention, and he turns around. And, Dr. Andrews, what is it?
Detective Nichols, I'm glad I caught you, and sorry to keep you, but I was thinking over this case, and the biggest issue that I have with it is the coroner's report. I'm not sure what your instincts are when reading it, but I can tell you it is quite impossible for people's limbs to be torn off by manual strength, let alone for a 14-year-old boy. And so I think the best place for me to start would be to speak with the coroner himself and determine, as a medical professional to medical professional, why he didn't point that out in his report.
Oh, that was my assessment as well. Unfortunately, we encounter it quite a bit in my line of work. But the doctor, he works at Boston General, and you'll find him there. He's there most days of the week. He's our main guy we go to for autopsies, and he works with the coroner's office there. And he asks if you have a a paper, or if you're from Boston or spent time here, then you would know where it's at, which I think in your background, you went to school here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're familiar with its location.
At Boston General.
Yeah. He's has a bit of a fragile ego, like most doctors, if you can pardon my generalization there. But just so you're aware, he didn't take my challenges to his official report too kindly. Ejected me from his office, in fact.
Oh, one of those. Very well. Then I shall take care not to get him too ruffled before I've gathered the information I need. But thank you, Detective, and we'll be seeing you again tomorrow evening for dinner.
Yeah, and good luck with the initiation ceremonies there. Interesting. I won't be there tonight, though. I have my duties to attend to. I will see you tomorrow. Good day, sir.
Excellent.
Getting across town's no problem for somebody with your wealth. I don't know if you had your own vehicle, but you could also just hire a taxi, or you could tap Finn McCracken, always ready to drive investigators to places they need to go.
Yeah, I have not been back here long enough to get a vehicle, so I'll just rely on a taxi.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm staying, so...
Right. So getting across town is no issue, although the traffic has increased somewhat since you were last here. In fact, there are many more what year would it have been when you did your schooling? I guess there would have been no automobiles the last time you were here then.
Yeah, so we're in 1921. So then I guess it would have been 1914, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So maybe a couple here and there. But yeah, it's not that the hustle and bustle is that there's more of it necessarily, but the automobile has changed the pace. So as you travel across town, like everything seems to happen really fast, much faster than it did with horse and buggy. And sorry, go ahead.
Another interesting thing, Boston was actually where the first subway was built at the end of the 1800s.
Yeah, which was also an option. Yeah. He pulls in front of the Boston General Hospital, and he lets you off. And you know that usually the coroner's offices are kept in the basement levels, where near to the morgue.
Yeah, where the freezers are.
Yeah, and there's obviously no need to really check in with anybody. You can just walk in and go to where you think it will be. And there are signs that indicate where different departments are and what have you. So in short order, you find yourself standing outside the coroner's office within the hospital there. And you can see stenciled on the door is Dr. Dyklaw's name. It's always been Dyklaw. Mm-hmm. It was never anything else.
Yeah.
And you let yourself in, and there, an old, frail woman is working the counter or the desk, typing away at the typewriter with a pretty impressive speed for an old lady.
So I'll take my hat off and stand patiently for her to, I don't want to upset her by interjecting. So I'll be polite and wait for her with my hat off.
Yeah. So she gets to a point where she rings I don't even know what it's,
the ribbon or whatever
hits
they
the
call
end,
it.
and it goes, and she sets it back, and then she looks up at you, and she says, "Yes."
Good afternoon, ma'am. I was hoping to speak with Dr. Dyklaw. I'm Dr. Wallace Andrews.
So she gets up without further comment and goes off somewhere else. I mean, she gives you sort of a look like slightly annoyed, but she goes into an adjoining office, and you hear murmured, "There's a Dr. Andrews here for you." And after a moment, a fairly tall man with, like a long, like all his features are kind of like long, like there's this huge gap between his nose and his upper lip that's kind of arresting, because you don't see that amount of it except on Stephen King. But but he just kind of, he even sort of ducks his head to get it through the door frame. But he has like a hard, sort of uncaring look when his gaze falls across you, and he says, "I'm Dr. Dyklaw. What can I do for you?"
It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm Dr. Andrews, and I've come to speak with you about a report you gave on a murder case, the murder of a man named Mr. Dooley.
Give me a psychology roll.
It's a weird thing for him to say. All right, let me find it. All right.
Nice.
Nice. Give yourself a check. So with that regular success, you see that when he says, "I don't remember any Mr. Dooley or a report on a Mr. Dooley. Are you sure I'm the right doctor?" You know that he's lying to you. You saw the glint of recognition in his eyes.
Yes, quite, sir. I've spoken with Detective Nichols, the lead investigator on the case, and I've seen the report for myself.
In fact, you could have the report.
Right.
If they
yeah, I
agreed
was
for
going to
them
say if I could. Yeah.
you could.
This report here, where you have signed your name.
Okay, so he put some reading glasses up. You know, they were hanging around his neck, and he pulls them up and he looks at it and he's like, "Oh yes, I do dozens of these. It's quite hard to remember all of them. Mr. Dooley. Yes, quite gruesome, this one. And what is it that you wanted to know about this report?"
Well, I am looking over this report and was quite struck by the details that the dismemberment of this body was not done in surgical manner. I'll point to the actual words, but by blunt force, as evidenced by the torn and lacerated skin surrounding the joints. Dr. Dyklaw, it is quite impossible, as I'm sure you're aware, for one person, let alone a 14-year-old child, to tear limbs from a human body. Perhaps a finger, but knees, arms, quite impossible. And I was, as I perused it, I was hoping to find some answer to this mystery. Do you remember seeing any evidence that ropes maybe had been affixed to the hands or the feet, ropes that might have then been used by multiple people to tear this body limb from limb?
Well, Dr. Andrews, if I saw that evidence, wouldn't it be in my report?
Yes.
You can see his face had flushed. He has what I like to call thermometer face, where you know immediately that you've touched a sore spot, so it's gone red.
Yeah, so at this point then what I want to try would be, I guess, is that what it's, persuasion maybe?
Yeah, you can use any of the social skills, whichever you seems most appropriate to how Andrews might do it.
Yeah, so the objective then is to get him to think that I'm actually trying to be understanding here. Of course it would be in your report, but as you said, you do so many of these, and a man of your stature and your workload, anybody can understand that mistakes can be made. And so I'm just here to clear up any of these discrepancies that we see.
Yeah, so I think with the way you're describing that, you could use one of two skills. You could use either persuade or charm, whichever stands a better shot for you.
Yeah, okay. I'll use persuade.
Nice.
I got a hard success.
Make a check.
Yeah, so that's the objective here, is to get, at least at this point. Yeah, I didn't see it in your report, but as you said, you make so many of these. Anyone can understand with such a busy workload that things can be left out. And I'm just trying to clear up any discrepancies here.
Well, it's a relief you understand the stress that we're under here. But I didn't leave any signs of being bound out of the report. I don't know how to make sense of the fact that somebody would just lie there and be torn apart. You know, it's inexplicable, and I admit that begrudgingly. But as to whether or not somebody can do that, that would be up for a jury to decide, don't you think?
Yes, of course. That's the way the law works, but it'd be best if the jury had all the information when they make that decision. I also wanted to ask your thoughts on the cause of death being blood loss during this dismemberment process, but the conspicuous lack of blood found at the crime scene.
So another question, perhaps if you spoke to Detective Nichols for him, as I'm sure you understand, I was not at the crime scene. I can't help but note an accusatory tone in your in your voice, and you could see you brought the tone in his cheeks to a white again, but now they go up red.
All right, so yes, perhaps I find it interesting that a doctor would write this report citing a cause of death due to blood loss when no blood was found, citing dismemberment at every articulating joint by blunt force.
That's what it appeared to be to me.
So then, in your opinion, can these activities be done by a 14-year-old boy?
I should think not. And if you're asking, did I see any marks that the body was drained of its blood prior to dismemberment, I did not see anything like that either. Everything that occurred to Mr. Dooley is in the report, which you know to be a lie because he mentioned nothing about the eyes being removed.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll actually jump on that. Right. Well, everything, I don't see anything in the report about his eyes being removed.
So this shocks him, and he says, how did you know about that? Before he can stop himself. And then he kind of is like, what do you mean, eyes removed?
You know what I mean, sir.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So it was the detective that told us that, right?
Yeah.
And the detective thought he'd done it himself because he had
Right. He had flesh underneath his fingernails.
Right. So that's what I'll say then. Dr. Dyklaw, this victim, had removed his own eyes. All signs point to, based on the flesh found under his own fingernails. This is a glaring detail, and yet you left it out of your report. Now, why would you do that?
So he pauses for a moment, looking nervously at his secretary, who is now listening to the back and forth with interest. And he says, Miss Wilson, I think it's time for your lunch break now. Mm-hmm. And so she hops up and exits the scene.
Yeah, I'm going to make a mental note of her name in case I need to talk to her later. So,
so he's like, surely, Dr. Andrews, you can't be so naive as to not understand how things work in Boston.
It is precisely because I am not naive that I'm here speaking with you. This is a preposterous report that struck me immediately upon hearing the details of the case, that this 14-year-old boy, and a slow one for that matter, is slated to be put on death row for a crime he could not have committed. Well, that certainly could not have committed alone. And I understand that police and politicians have a desire to solve cases, but it's my own theory that some pressure must have been put on you in order to leave such glaring details out of the report that you signed your name to.
Well, you're correct. You're quite right. The powers that be want it to appear that way, and it's dangerous to argue against those powers. Somebody paid me to make the report the way it is.
Who paid you?
I will just say that who paid me is also the same as who's prosecuting this case. The same department.
How much did they pay you?
What does it matter?
I suppose it doesn't.
Enough for a doctor to accept it.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
It goes all the way to In fact, I've had quite enough of this conversation.
As have I. And I had enough of it before you did. And I'll run out.
You can see yourself out, Dr. Andrews.
Good day, Dr. Dyklaw.
And as you exit the coroner's office, you
Yeah, I want to put emphasis on
Right.
that I judge that he has betrayed his profession.
Yeah, after you close the door, you hear, something crash,
Nah,
like it was pushed over in a fury, and some muttered cursing.
Hmm.
I think Andrews is now able to get a detective license with that.
Right.
That was pretty gumshoey.
Yeah, good job, Brandon.
Yeah.
All right, so the scene will fade on the good Dr. Andrews as he stands outside the coroner's office there. And we will pop over to old Jimmy Whitmire as he hits the streets of Boston, trying to think if any of his old connections here are still operating at the same places they were. So, James, we can sort of abstract you, traveling around Boston, trying to reconnect with some of the old people you used to run with we'll use your career skill stand in and have a stealth roll. And if I understood it correctly, you're asking about this Liber Ivonis and any more murders that sort of fit the description of what happened to Mr. Dooley.
Yeah, I'd also like to inquire about who has a desire for occult, stolen like occult goods.
Okay.
As maybe I can't find necessarily the people that sold it, but possibly find a couple leads on who it might have went to, at least, is the thought process behind that.
Okay, so, we get like a montage of you walking up to a guy on the street corner that, sells bootleg liquor, or, go into some old gambling houses you knew of to meet people that were into that sort of thing, and you're talking to them, and you're met with, failure at first, but go ahead and get that stealth roll out there for me. And that represents your knowledge of fences and other things that move objects on the down low. Oh.
So an extreme success.
Yeah, I see that. Well done.
It's because of the montage, man.
Right. So it's at one of these gambling houses. At least from outside, it just looks like somebody's residence, but the basement area has been converted to sort of an exclusive speakeasy. And the guy who works, like you go inside the house, and then the basement steps descend down to this area, and there's a big fella standing there who recognizes you from back in the day. And he says, Jimmy, haven't seen you around Boston for a while. How you doing?
Good. What is his name?
Oh, sorry. He pauses to think
like
about it.
Joe.
No,
Hey,
his name
Joey,
is-
good to see you.
I like Joe.
Joe. All right, yeah, we'll go with it. We'll call him Joe Jackson. At least that's what
I'm
he
the only
says.
one that calls him Joey, though, because he probably doesn't like it.
Yeah, he says, I'm doing good. Where you been? Like I said, we haven't seen you. You haven't done any work for the boss for a little while.
No, I mean, you remember I lost that shipment, that I was trying to run down south, and then I ended up overseas for a bit. It was, some international work, but I'm back. How about you? How have you been?
Pretty good. Same old thing. Standing at this door, letting people in. So you going in or not?
Yeah, I'll ask him who's still around.
Oh, the usual guys. Owen, Drew, Casey. They're all in there right now playing cards.
I'll nod to him and slip him like $2-3.
Okay. Yeah, he pockets it deftly and gives you his thanks, turns around and opens the door behind him, and then, stands up to make himself sort of thin so you can scoot by and get into this smoky interior where there are a few tables laid out and people are playing cards. And, that murmur of conversation rises in the room along with ephemeral haze of cigarette and cigar smoke. And you see those guys, Casey, Owen, and Drew, are not actively playing a game. They're just sitting around smoking and listening to the radio. Sounds like a baseball game.
Okay. So yeah, if I can, I'll try to not like, crouch down sneaking or anything, but I'll just try and make my way to the table without causing a lot of ruckus, and get there, put my hand on Drew's shoulder and say, "What's new, boys?"
Ah, prodigal son returns. Been a long time, Jimmy.
It
You
sure
got a lot of
has.
nerve showing up here.
You know me. Was always they always said that I had some big ones. But what's new with you guys?
Just listening to baseball. So what brings you back to Boston?
So I'll pull up a chair and kind of lean in like I'm listening to the game and just ask him that I'm looking for some books now, right? Those some weird books. I'll kind of give him a little bit of an idea of not like the whole detail of it, but just some mythos type books is the gist that I'm trying to get across to him.
You dropped the booze and went to books? That don't make no sense. Is money in that?
There is, there's a lot more, and a lot more than you would think. As you guys should, stop by sometime. As I'll show you some stuff that I got overseas.
Yeah, we'll do that. You in town long? I hear you're in New York now.
Yeah, I was decided to move out of Boston. As things got a little dicey, with that last run.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Anyhow, I did hear about somebody asking for a book, but you're not going to like who it was.
Do I know with that who it probably is?
Probably. You think of two options, but when he says the name, Francis Walsh, otherwise known as Francis Sweetheart Walsh, it's the least worse option in a way. It's not the guy who had the load of bootleg liquor you dropped, but he has a pretty severe reputation, the gangster of Charleston. They call him Sweetheart, sort of tongue-in-cheek. He does like to make deals with people, but, he'll kill you if you go back on one of his deals, like without hesitation. So a lot of people are wary and dealing with him. But yeah, that's who was asking for it.
Well, I guess it could be worse, but not by much. Is he still hanging around at any of the old places, or he got somewhere new?
Yeah, he's still at that old bar of his that he had going before Prohibition came in. You thinking about going over there and talking to him?
I may have big ones, but I don't think they're that big.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Kind of clap one of the guys on the back. But I'll sit there and listen to the game with him for a bit, and then bring up about that stuff that international job that I had. Is you guys know anywhere else might unload some occult goods? Not books, but something else.
Yeah, I can talk to a few people if I get a cut of it, of course, if you sell anything.
Well, obviously. Like I said, you guys all need to come by. There's definitely got some work for the old crew here.
All right, we'll pause there with you, Mr. Whitmire. Scene will fade on you guys listening to the baseball game and smoking tobacco. Okay, so Mr. Muller and Mr. Monroe are setting off to plumb the depths of collected knowledge at some library somewhere. So you guys both know that there are quite a few places you could go in Boston. There's your standard Boston Public Library. There's the Widner Library on the Harvard campus, which is actually the biggest collection of books in the United States at this time.
I think they don't like me, though. There's one of those places that don't like me. I got thrown out.
Yeah, it was. You guys were at the public library when because you were knocking on the walls trying to find their secret location.
I thought I also got thrown out of another one, though, because I was trying to find access to books that were kind of like...
Yeah. Actually, Dr. Henry Armitage at the Miskatonic Library.
Okay.
There's a faux pas there. I think I'm detecting a pattern with this.
Hey, he gets turned around aged aged paper and ink.
So you guys are discussing where I suppose best to start because you're going off together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll try to steer Monroe against any of the libraries that know my face and
Was it the Harvard Library that you?
No, it was the Miskatonic.
Okay.
And then the public library here.
I'm actually kind of having a flashback to one of the mask visions I had where it was like outside Harvard University.
Okay. Did you have a vision like that?
Yeah. It was
I'll
like,
neither confirm nor deny.
yeah, there was one of the mask visions I had that had like two people like dragging a homeless guy into Harvard University or something like that.
If you say so.
I was going through my last journal to see if I could find out exactly.
It would appear that reality has abandoned you, Monroe.
Yeah, I was saying that the Game Master's like the best Siri ever. He remembers everything and just spits it out. Well,
speaking of the mask, just a quick aside for Whitmire, where is the golden mask?
As it's in a safe location in New York.
Okay. All right. Anyhow, continue your discussion. So Mr. Monroe is trying to point to the Widner Library?
Yeah, at Harvard.
Yeah, and so I'll kind of go along with that. Like, yes, the public library is just full of nuisances and kids running around, and that other library is just full of buffoons.
Yes, they also tend not to have the specialization of the kinds of things that we would...
Oh, they have them behind lock and key.
Which would be problematic.
I thought that this was America.
So the Widner Library is located, as I said, on the Harvard campus, which is outside of Boston, either in or around the Cambridge neighborhood. So being familiar with Boston as you are, Mr. Monroe, these are your stomping grounds. You know you can catch the subway, or actually you guys are across the Charles River, so it's just a matter of, getting a trolley or a cab, which I think between your guys' credit ratings, you could probably soak that, no problem.
Right. This isn't me trying to fish for a skill, so I'm going to roll my history, and this is how much I attempt to just out-talk Monroe.
Well, I'll gladly give somebody a check. Let's make it a contest.
But this is me trying to, out of character, just kind of out-talk Monroe's character.
But are you a historian?
No.
But you guys are pretty high, both in occult, right?
Yes.
Well, maybe you can steer it to that subject, and then you guys could have a contest on that, and I'll give the check to the winner.
Where's my historian?
If you role play it a little bit.
Under firearms?
So why is it under firearms?
Because knowledge is the most deadly weapon, Monroe.
Isn't it alphabetical?
All right, so there's... Yeah. Oh, the first one would have been...
Oh, nice. Oh, it's like... Okay, so
I would have gotten a success versus an extreme on his end as far as history. Now to steer towards the occult.
Ooh. So would I verse that? Or
yeah, so yours is 55, and what's...
So my history was 55, I got a 30. His was 80, he got a 13. So he got an extreme success on the history.
All right, so let's say... as you're being battered by his impressive knowledge of history.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with occult.
Well, seize onto something that you think you might know more about the occult surroundings of a particular event.
I'm going to say that there probably is something that you could seize on easily in that, as he would specialize in like Egyptian stuff. Like he was overdoing some excavations in his youth.
Okay, all right. So I got Lance's occult roll.
All right, so mine?
Yeah.
Ooh. So just normal successes?
So with a tie, it goes to the person with the higher rating.
Okay. So once I key on something on the occult, then I'll start mentioning the temples that we have in Peru and that the recent excavations that we did there, and then of course lead that on into my research in occult dealings here in the United States, especially in the Massachusetts area. So it's a contest of wills back and forth.
So I guess I'd be able to keep pace with a standard success?
Yeah, you don't do too badly, but he has very carefully laid a trap that displays one bit of ignorance in what you know. And then he sprung it at the tail end.
The Peruvian.
Maybe it left you shocked and speechless for a moment.
Gott in Himmel. Do my eyes melt out of my face and my hair catch on fire?
Make a sanity roll, Mr. Monroe. But that conversation, you guys, it fills the cab the whole ride over.
Is it one of those where we get in like to the point where we might actually to outsiders sound like we are having a full-blown argument?
Very animated. So you see.
But I conjecture.
But yeah, so you guys, the cab lets you out at the Harvard campus.
Do we have to pay, or does he just want us gone?
Yeah, he actually does. He's like, hey, you guys got to pay.
Since Mueller's an old guy with a walking stick, do you get the scene when you arrive where you just start stamping it down on the floor? Trying to override Monroe's objection?
Oh, probably. I'm pretty sure we got the whole gambit here. All right, so he wants us to pay?
Right, yeah, because you guys started walking away talking. And he's like, oh, hey, the fare.
I'll start patting my pockets. I'll lean heavily on my cane and start patting my vest, trying to find my wallet.
And I'll probably say something along the lines of, well, this is quite the turn of events. Usually I'm the one that can't find my wallet.
I'm sorry, Al Monroe. It is with age.
It sounds like a wonderful excuse in all aspects.
I'll narrow my eyes at him and I'll kind of menacingly kind of shake my cane his direction.
But I'll continue on. But as we are taught in our youth, and as at least as far as anyone who has any civil manners, that we respect our elders here, and so it is my pleasure to pay for your cab ride over.
You have sufficiently placated me, Al Monroe. You are quite a gentleman and a scholar.
As yourself, and it is wonderful to meet such a scholar.
All right, so as...
Even if you count the Peruvian pyramids as scholarly endeavor.
So the cab lets you out in Harvard Square, so you're well into the campus. You asked for the Widner Library specifically, so the cab lets you out as close as he could get you to it. Go ahead and give me a spot hidden roll, just Mr. Monroe.
Oh, I believe that is ageist of you, Herr Game Master.
So you look around the campus and you spot, well, this must be it over here. You both agree and you walk off that way. And from everybody else's perspective, as the camera's looking at you guys, you see a gate that would be familiar to you had you spotted it.
Had I been paying attention.
But we know that it's there. So anyhow, the Widner Library is placed in a part of Harvard that's known as College Yard, and you guys are both versed enough in the ways of libraries to know that the way this one works in particular is you go in and they have a bunch of reading tables, and then you get a librarian to fetch books for you while you guys sit at the tables. The collection's actually closed to the public, even though the library's open, and they fondly refer to the place where these books are stored as the stacks, as they are actually basement levels, and they go underneath a large part of this area of the campus. They have a reputation for those that have been in the stacks, and you've been in a number of times on like official, if you've given a guest lecture at the college and you wanted access, then they let you go in there, and it has a unique smell of mildewing books that permeates the area because there are millions of volumes.
It gets the blood pumping.
Right. But yeah, so you walk into this hushed atmosphere, although there is sort of a busy sound of turning pages and scribbling pens, and you can almost hear collective thought, it seems like. All this knowledge in one place. And you guys can pick a table or a bench area that you like by the window and signal to a librarian to get started.
Actually, I'd kind of like to try and persuade the librarian to allow us down into the stacks in the occult section.
Okay. So you have a couple of options, sort of similar to what Dr. Andrews got, where you could just leave it to a social skill roll. And or you could try to maybe use your archaeology, or Johann could use his history to establish a contact at this college. It will be... You'll need a hard success on the social skill roll.
Okay. But
I think in both your guys' cases, a regular success might work for a contact.
Okay.
Okay. doing a contact. And I wouldn't want to just be left down there alone, but having a guide with us that would normally go down and get the books and come back up.
And could possibly fetch stuff that they know the location of or something like that.
Yeah, point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So history from Johann and archaeology from Lance.
Are you serious? All right. History really is his
I was a professional in it for
and it's showing.
probably like 50 years.
Yeah. So the way it plays out is the person, you knew a professor of archaeology, but it just so happened that they retired within the last year, and that was a fact you were unaware of. But at that point, Johann's able to step forward while the librarian, actually give me your appearance roll, Lance, real quick.
Appearance.
Yeah.
I suppose that's probably under firearms too.
Or credit rating, whichever one's higher. Appearance is a characteristic, so it's at the top.
Yeah, it's one of your stats.
Well, they're both not very good. Appearance is higher, so all right.
Nice.
So I stand up straight and
Right.
pull my coat straight and
Yeah, you can see the when this librarian first sees you, it looks like, and he sees your attire, the garishness of it. It's like he's trying to blink a bright spot out of his vision after looking at you, but it doesn't damage his opinion of you in the end. However, your contact just doesn't work there anymore, so it's not going to work. At which point, Johann steps in with history, where you are actually somewhat acquainted with a history professor by the name of Preston Brock.
Okay.
against a 35, I fail against a 60.
And the librarian agrees. Well, I suppose if you're here on his say so, yeah, I can take you guys down into the stacks. What is it that you're looking for?
We are doing research on a occult ritual. Unfortunately, I don't. Well, could we try to determine like the culture of origin, perhaps, of what
based off of what you heard in the
heard or saw, like
no,
so we could narrow it down.
Not really, but just by occult, ritualistic sacrifice type stuff, it does narrow it down quite a bit. So he says, yes, matters of a cult, particularly death cults and sacrifice, are in the basement levels. If you gentlemen will come with me.
Dankeschön, young man.
All right, so he leads you downstairs, down into the dank, mildewy stacks.
I'd like to turn my historical verbal assault onto this poor young man.
We're probably both speaking at the same time.
He's a student. He's like, I just work here, guys. I think I'm going to not become a librarian after.
Hearing that he's a student would actually egg us on to teach him the things that he should know.
Well, surely you'd want to study in the fields of history as well as Egypt if you don't want to do anything with Peru.
Here we are.
Here we are. Good day, sir.
I'll just be over yonder if you guys need me to fetch anything specific. As you can see, there are little reading nooks here. Make yourself comfortable. And so, yeah, you have, they're not very tall ceilings down here, just tall enough to fit the shelves in on either side. And there's rows and rows. And it's relatively dark down here as there's no natural lighting. You just have these hanging lamps with those really pronounced angular, like circle shades on them, right? So you have like these points of light every 15 feet or so, but then it can get rather dim as you move outside of that.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know if it's too late to change anything of the narration, but I do have a Harvard contact already. I have Norma Mayer, who is a Harvard librarian.
The librarian says, yeah, that's what you said.
Okay.
And and he goes off. Okay, so I guess we'll start with the use library roll, and if I am remembering correctly, the particulars of the murder are what you're keying on, and also the eye symbol. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so go ahead and give me the use library.
This is where Monroe's going to shine.
All right. Oh, just a regular success.
Yeah, so I'll be kind of wandering around, like peering at books real close because the lighting's probably bad on the old eyes. I can't quite see or make out what the titles are.
And you're also finding, the dearth of ways in which sacrifice has been performed. None of them seem to match up to what was described with Mr. Dooley.
That's another thing that could possibly happen is, because this happens to me when cleaning my room, is I'll find a book and begin to flip through it.
And you get stuck on it.
And hours go by.
Yeah.
And in your case, after also quite a long time of searching, you actually find in a bit of, I suppose, serendipity, one of Jackson Elias's books, The Witch Cults of New England, that you're kind of flipping through. You're like, oh, he's in the occult section. I suppose I knew that. And it details different cults that survived the trip from England to the colonies. And as you're flipping through, you see an eye symbol that kind of grabs your attention. It's
So yeah, when I first pick up the book, I'll immediately begin, name dropping, Jackson Elias to
oh, I know this.
Dr. Muller. Yeah, and that even though he's probably not listening, I'll be going off on our adventure together and talking about our discussions in the past, and he may not even be in the same aisle as I am, but I'm still just talking.
Oh, that is good, Herr Monroe.
It's okay, Johann. You can one up him, because once you see the name and some of the content, you realize that he gave a lecture at an SEU meeting that you attended in the past. You just couldn't place it when you'd first seen the eye symbol, like who it was and everything he had said. But now it kind of comes together a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll kind of put a shaky hand and kind of write my glasses. And what was it? Oh, Elias Jackson?
Jackson Elias.
Jackson Elias. Elias, yes. I attended the lecture that he gave. Very informative young man.
Yes, and trying to one-up him one more time, I'll say, we're in discussions with him in correspondence, of course, as he's still out of the States. He's planning on doing a demonstration or put on a symposium at my museum of one of his most recent books.
I'll have you know that I'm older than your god. I'll hit him with my cane.
So the content of this book, most of it you don't find useful. It's just the matters surrounding the eye symbol. He associates the image, which is just a crudely drawn image. It's an eye with like three Ys with the I suppose the arms of the Ys angled towards the eye. Okay. Surrounding it. So,
okay.
For those of you that have read the Corbit House incident report from the SEU, then you would have seen a photo of it as well, if that came in your memory. But Johann, you're intimately familiar with it as you saw a painting of it at the Church of Contemplation.
So how much do I remember, like the Church of Contemplation?
Yeah.
So I'll, yes, that's it. Herr Newell and what were the other two that were with
Thompson.
We saw such a symbol at the abandoned church of contemplation, burned out church that was some sort of off sect of some religion. We wrote our report on it. We stumbled across it during the Corbit House investigation, which might be another avenue that we could go back to, perhaps.
Yes, very much so.
But now that we have this, perhaps we have something more to go on.
So,
book goes, or Jackson Elias goes on to say, and this is kind of like a wrap-up section of the book. The symbol, or the cult to which the symbol belongs, is not well detailed. He's just kind of going on to other ones that he's heard mention of in New England. And the name of the cult that is attached to this eye symbol was called the Cult of Starry Wisdom, and they were based in Providence, Rhode Island, now defunct as of the late 1800s. And he has some minor notes in there that there was rumors of child kidnapping and evidently sacrifice or murder, because those missing children never came back, and that some members fled Providence because of the reputation of the Cult of Starry Wisdom. to other places like Boston, for example.
Okay.
He traced some members there before they fell out of the public record, or at least insofar as he was looking into it. And so the length of time that you guys spent before you came across this one, actually, you pull out your pocket watch or whatnot, and you realize it's about time to be getting back for your initiation ceremony.
Okay.
So you'll have to leave Johann to further study.
Yeah, I'll make some notes in my little notepad that I'd carry with me, and ask him to, if he wouldn't mind researching the cult of Starry. Chris is actually getting an eye twitch at me asking him to do something.
No, that's Johann.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I had to switch eyes, because the right one can't do it that good.
But yeah, I'll tell him that I must be on my way if I'm going to do the initiation into the Hermetic Order, but that following up on the Church of the Starry, what was it again?
Starry Wisdom.
Church of the Starry Wisdom, in more depth might give us the kind of leads we need to perhaps track one of these people down.
Of course, Herr Monroe. I'll gladly do such a thing. Your company will be most missed.
And I have no doubt in your skills, and I am looking forward to finding what you have unearthed in this grand palace of wisdom upon my return.
Indeed. And so I'll reach out a shaky hand and grab his notes from him.
Yeah.
So Whitmire and Andrews, similarly, you find yourselves at a point in time where you're to return for your initiation at the Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight. So if there's nothing small, like grabbing dynamite, that you needed to do before, then I'll just fast forward to that.
I'm all out of dynamite.
So you got to pick some up.
Yeah, I don't have anything
Saying
else
that,
I need to do.
I don't have any to grabs, so I guess I'll just go to this Hermetic Order initiation.
With a
Dynamite
wheelbarrow full
less.
of dynamite.
All right, so you guys arrive at the prescribed time at this Romanesque structure, some 3 stories tall, and you go inside to the familiar foyer scene where the servant once again waits for an explanation he likely already knows, and he leads you up to the 2nd level. I change over to that map. Let's give it a moment for it to load in for you guys. Are you there?
It's still just a blank screen.
There it is. You may have to zoom out to find the location that we're actually in. The rest of it's all black.
Yeah, there we are.
I found us.
Okay, so you guys are actually led up by a servant where you're greeted by an order member at the top of the steps. You actually recognize him as James Clark, the lawyer you met earlier today. And he takes you into this room and he says, so there's a little bit of ritual to this whole thing, but I assure you it's just ritual. So what we're going to do is you guys are going to put on these black robes that we have here for you. And he kind of picks some off of hangers in that preparation room there. So what's going to happen is we're going to blindfold each of you and lead you into the lodge hall room. And then you're going to receive a lecture on our noble purposes. And he's kind of smiling at all this. You know, you could detect a bit of an embarrassment at the ritualistic element of it, you know, at least in his case. And he says, as a new member of the order, you can expect to learn great and mysterious things. However, you're going to be asked after this lecture to bind yourselves with an oath. Although I want to say right off the start, you'll never be asked to do anything immoral or embarrassing. That's not what it's all about. The noble philosopher believes that ritual, you know, helps cement processes and commencements in people's minds, and that's the reason for all of this. So if you'll put the robes on and put on your blindfolds. Oh, one other thing to teach you, secret handshake. So he goes to each one of you, and the handshake is just like, you know, you do the regular handshake, but then he says you tap your 2 fingers, you extend them and tap them on the other person's hand just 3 times. And that way you know if you've met an order member when you're out in public. and you'll get weird looks when they're not an order member. But
I'm sorry. What was that handshake?
so you extend your index, or not your index, or your middle finger and your ring finger, and then tap, where it would reach out on the other person's hand. So if you were to shake, right, just like that. Everybody's trying to do the secret handshake. Yeah, practice it a lot. It's trickier than it looks.
Yeah, that's an awkward way to, like, if it was your index finger and your middle finger, that'd be a little bit different. But
well, you could do that. How are they going to know? They're not looking.
Yeah.
They're just feeling the...
trying to
What is it?
shake and then pull those two fingers up to...
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to get the manual dexterity to do it. But anyhow, let's get you in the robes. We do black for a neophyte, which is the rank you'll be attaining upon the end of this ceremony. Now, do you have any questions before we blindfold you and lead you across the way? All right, no questions.
Are there any responses that we're supposed to give during these meetings? I know that
The time
occasionally-
for questions has passed.
No questions. Yeah, so he's gonna ask that you repeat the oaths after him after the lecture. So that's pretty much it for your part, and to kneel at an altar.
Okay.
All right, so you guys are led across the hall. You hear that door close. You hear another door open, and you get the sense of an immense indoor space. Anyways, when you come into the next room, there's that change in acoustics, and you hear some murmurs, like there might be more people there, and you feel that person leading you directs you to this altar, and kind of helps you to kneel at the altar. And then he actually removes your blindfold, and the room is very dark, although there is some light coming from somewhere, and you see like the twinkling of it reflected in eyes out to the left and right of you, like other order members are sitting there. But if somebody wants to go and give me a spot hidden roll, or everybody there, all three of you.
I thought we were blindfolded.
No,
Yeah,
he took
it
them
just
off
got
after he
removed.
nailed you.
Okay.
How do we do?
Nice.
We did really good.
Okay, so
Every
yeah, you
type of
guys...
success you could want.
I got an extreme.
Mine is hard.
So you guys see that there are these tiny electric lights in the ceiling that are very dim. That is the source of the light in this room. Although you do also see two larger chandeliers that would light up the whole room if they were on, and one immense bulb in the center of the room that is currently off. In any case, as you're knelt there at the altar, a robed figure steps up to the far end of the altar onto a dais there, and you can see, although you can't really pick out the color, but there's some huge drape behind him that looks to be a different material than the rest of the wall. That's how you're able to distinguish it. But he stands up, even though you can't see who it is, you realize who it is when they begin speaking. It's John Scott, but he starts his lecture to you guys. Let us now endeavor to conceive what matter must be, when or if, in its absolute extreme of simplicity. Here the reason flies at once to imparticularity, to a particle, to one particle, a particle of one kind, of one character, of one nature, of one size, of one form, a particle, therefore, without form and void, a particle positively, a particle at all points, a particle absolutely unique, individual, undivided, and not indivisible, only because he who created it, by dint of his will, can by an infinitely less energetic exercise of the same will, as a matter of course, divide it. At this point, that big bulb you guys saw in the center of the room flares so brightly that you can't even look at it, and you can actually feel the heat coming at it. It's like this huge high wattage bulb, and you actually kind of have to shield your eyes from it. But then it kind of fades to just like the regular room lighting. And he continues. The assumption of absolute unity in the primordial particle includes that of infinite divisibility. Let us conceive the particle, then, to be only not totally exhausted by diffusion into space. From the one particle as a center, let us suppose to be irradiated spherically in all directions, to immeasurable but still to definite distances in the previously vacant space, a certain inexpressibly great, yet limited number of unimaginably, yet not infinitely minute atoms. And at that point, these small lights start to twinkle on brighter in a ring out from that big bulb, right? This constitution has been affected by forcing the originally and therefore normally one into the abnormal conditions of many. An action of this character implies reaction. A diffusion from unity under the conditions involves a tendency to return into unity, a tendency ineradicable until satisfied. And he pauses for a moment. What I have just said to you are not my words, but that of Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, from his prose poem, Eureka, his last and what he considered his greatest work. Paraphrased, of course, as Mr. Poe is too verbose for even a collection of fine gentlemen such as yourself. Here he has described a universe forever in a cycle of expansion and contraction, forever on its way from the one to the many, from the many to the one, and very well may have anticipated, in part, the scientific truth of our universe. As some of you know, it has been observed that spiral nebulae are moving away from our perspective on Earth, and that Mr. Einstein's theory of general relativity does not admit static cosmological solutions, but describes the universe as either expanding or shrinking. And you'll have to remember that the Big Bang Theory isn't fully coalesced at this time. As you can see here, the artist, Mr. Poe, teases at the limits of human imagination and thought, but it is the scientist that confirms or refutes what the artist imagined. I tell you not to strain at the limits of human imagination as an artist would, because who can count on the vagaries of their muse, but to adopt the scientific process, as all men can be trained to understand the material world. The principles of this order are science, philosophy, and magic. As a neophyte, science will be your guiding principle. We are all of us subjects in an objective world. From this understanding, we have learned that our eyes may see, our ears may hear, our tongue may taste, our nose may smell, and our skin may feel. But more than these five senses can measure exists. We must maintain that an objective reality exists and that it can be shared by rational observers, even if it threatens our own dearly held notions of homocentric or ideological belief. Before I call for your oaths, I will leave you again with the words of Mr. Poe. What I here propound is true, therefore it cannot die. Or if by any means it be now trodden down so that it die, it will rise again to life everlasting. Repeat these oaths after me. I promise to keep the secrets of the order.
I promise to keep the secrets of the order.
I promise to seek after knowledge.
I promise to seek after knowledge.
I promise to live according to the principles of the order.
I promise to live according to the principles of the order.
I promise to understand that I am a subject in an objective world.
I promise to understand that I am a subject in an objective world.
Welcome to the order, brothers. Rise and be recognized. And at that point, the house lights go on, as it were, and you see surrounding you are a bunch of order members to the left and the right. And they all stand and they are clapping and cheering, and they sort of converge on you guys, shaking hands, clapping you on the shoulder, welcoming you to the order. A lot of them are curious to get to know you because they hear that you are here at Mr. Rupert Merriweather's recommendation, and a lot of them are quite fond of him. But you're kind of it's kind of a whirlwind. You're sort of rushed out, like down the steps and into the kitchen, where a great feast has been put together for you. So give it a moment to move it over to that map.
That was actually a pretty smooth transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. And look, Legolas is here as John Scott.
Oh, Legolas. Yeah, so you are brought to this room where a whole meal's laid out, and there's servants on hand waiting to attend to...
Johann, what are you doing there?
Oh, right, he wasn't supposed
Surprise!
I can't see anything if I'm not there.
He never was there. And most of the conversation is light or small talk in the early part of the meal, but as food is consumed and drink is consumed, people start to push their plates away and conversation opens up a bit. So at this point, Wallace, you've found yourself seated to a guy who's introduced himself as Dr. Edward Call, retired, of course. He's a great wide man. As a doctor, you might wonder how he's let himself get to that state, but there he is. He's got jowls that shake when he speaks to you, but he has a jovial attitude and sort of a weird, almost British affectation to his speech. Even though he doesn't necessarily sound British, he'll just occasionally pronounce certain words.
Like that kind of old school, rich
right,
vernacular. Yeah.
Doctor what?
Edward Call. I was going to ask you guys if you saw nameplates now.
Yes.
Yep.
On the NPCs. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's how I knew that Legolas was John Scott.
So yeah, Dr. Edward Call's been in your ear for a little while.
What
over
was
dinner.
That?
What's that?
Why did it just blow up Dr. Edward Call?
The GM can grab a token and force everybody for it to expand out.
Definitely
Him. Yeah, dude.
That took a sanity hit there.
So,
Everybody roll a sanity roll.
So, as I understand it, you're a doctor yourself. Is that right, Mr. Andrews?
Yes, sir, I am. And what kind of a doctor are you?
A retired one.
Oh, the best kind.
But I just had a general practitioner, family doctor.
Yeah.
Drive out to the country.
Honorable profession.
Yeah, I much preferred it to the hospitals. Far too much stress there for me. Have you worked in any hospitals?
Yes, that's where most of my work has been done, is in hospital.
So
most recently did work in a hospital in Peru.
Peru. Oh, yes, I heard about that.
Hospital. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Meriwether was saying something about you and some of the others' adventures. Got into trouble with the savages down there, was it?
Well, no, the natives were quite welcoming there, but there was some trouble.
Trouble. That's in my retirement. I find that's what I'm looking for. Some adventure, before I shuffle off the mortal coil, as it were. Ever since, and he starts to go into his talk about retirement, he mentions, he's like, my wife died last year. No, don't be sad. I
didn't like her.
I know most people wouldn't admit this, but John Scott has encouraged us to talk the truth without concerns of, moral judgment.
Oh.
We're safe to say our thoughts here in these walls. And while I was grieving, and all of that is true, of course, what they don't tell you is how relieved you'll be after a long relationship with a woman when she dies. It's, sometimes I'll get sad. I find I absent-mindedly make tea for two, and, well, she's not there anymore, but she's also not telling me I can't go to this place or talk to this person. And are you married?
No, sir, no longer. I was for a time. My wife and daughter died of the flu.
Well, then you know what I'm talking about.
I'm afraid I do not. But I can see what you're trying to say.
Right. Your daughter,
We weren't together for quite as long as you and your wife were.
A child would be something else altogether. We were never able to have children. The thing that most fascinates me about you, Doctor, is I understand you're a member of the Society for the Exploration of the Unexplained. Is that correct?
Yes, I joined that society. after my trip in Peru.
So you're fascinated with unexplained mysteries.
Yes, although that wasn't true always. After the events in Peru, it's become quite important to me to discover mysteries that others can't explain.
Did you do any of the investigations surrounding the flying cow incidents up near Bolton? I found those particularly fascinating.
I was not involved in that.
Do you think there's any truth to it?
Maybe. I find it hard to believe that cows can fly, but I have seen some odd things.
Oh, I believe it.
So,
as a doctor, yeah, we've seen our fair share. I wonder if you might do me a personal favor now that we're fraternal brothers and everything. Next time you go off on one of your hair-raising investigations, would you allow me to partake? I tell you, I'm awfully lacking in interesting activities in my later years.
Yes, I will keep you in mind. It would always benefit to have another doctor on board.
And you mean that truly, right?
I do. But, no.
Oh, dear.
No, I'm just kidding.
I understand.
No, I do. No, I'll say, because I'm like brand new to this, so I can't, I don't want to just come out with the truth. So I'll just be like, yeah, I definitely would love to have another doctor, another analytical mind to help me bring some order to the mysteries that we uncover.
I'd love to introduce you to untold horrors that I witnessed on my journeys in Peru.
Just have them always walk
also those fat worms that you can introduce him to.
Yeah, they'd like this.
It's
guy.
a feast.
Doctor, have you ever witnessed what an elephant rifle does to a human torso? No need for surgical knives. You just reach right in and pluck out what you want, if it's still there.
All right, Lance. So you've been kind of overhearing this conversation between the two doctors.
I'll probably be, since I'm right next to John Scott, I'll probably be conversing with him.
Yeah, he's drawn your attention, and he says, so as I understand it, Mr. Merriweather says you're quite versed in the occult.
Yes, I've made it kind of a passion project for myself over the years, and that's what my museum is dedicated to.
I have a very interesting book to show you. And he signals to one of the servants. Servant comes over, whispers in his ear, and departs. And he's like, perhaps you could illuminate me on some areas that I might be lacking. As I understand it, you went down to Peru on Mr. Merriweather's behest.
Yes, that was an enlightening experience.
Yeah, I read Thaddeus Grunwald there at the Miskatonic University did an annotation on your collected journals. It was quite fascinating. Is that the complete God's honest truth?
Well, all God's honest truths are through a perspective. If you're looking for another take on the matter, Jackson Elias has a book that is being released very shortly about his adventures down there with us, and he stayed behind and did some more investigations to, flesh out some of the more local traditions and what he could find.
And what was the nature of this? Was it a cult you guys ran across? The term escapes me now. You referred to them as
the Pishtaku.
Right. Sounded like a myth.
Well, don't all death cults?
Indeed. And that's why I find them endlessly fascinating.
That's a subject that we both share.
See, because I don't find that myths are created whole cloth. I think that's a far too pessimistic view of humans. I think there are always some seed of truth at the core of every myth.
I agree most wholeheartedly, and it is a matter that I have made subject of endless search. In fact, my time at college, I spent trying to uncover as many of the details of the cults that came over with the settlers in America, as well as some of the cults that had been here before.
And tell me, have you discovered anything that has thrown off this materialistic view our society seems to be trapped in at the moment.
Well, not as far as the occult is concerned.
And at that point, though, a servant arrives back with a great leather, or what appears to be leather-bound tome of significant age, and he sets it, John Scott pulls out a pair of white gloves first, and he happens to have a pair for you. And he kind of opens it up very carefully, and give me an occult roll.
Okay. Ooh. I will have already read the book and memorized it.
Oh, yeah, that one's...
Depending on what it is, you might have read a version of it, but this might be the real, one of the real printings or whatever, yeah.
Maybe
Right, and that's
Meriwether
what it
has
is.
something on it.
It is so I'll show it to everyone there. So this book, you recognize it instantly almost before it's brought to you by the Latin inscribed on the cover and on the binding. But the title for the book in Latin is the Malleus Maleficarum. Now, you have actually read the German translation. In English, we call it the Hammer of Witches, but it has the excellent German title, Der Hexenhammer.
Nice.
It's a guide for inquisitors during the Middle Ages on the identification and torturous persuasion of witches. Some people think it may have helped send approximately 9 million people to their deaths based off its prescriptions. And he's like, I find this book most fascinating. I have a difficult time thinking of any other piece of written word that might have killed more people outside of the major religious documentations, if you two are to ascribe the guilt to those. But here, please take a look.
Yes, this is one that I have heard of and read in some forms before. What was your questions? You mentioned that there were some clarifications that you thought I might be able to give you in this matter.
Well, my Latin's not as great as it should be, I suppose. This is just one of the many rare books we have in here, but I had understood that you spoke or read or wrote Latin, or all three, perhaps.
Yes, I can translate most. I wouldn't say that I am perfunctory fluent in it, but yes, I should be able to assist.
Well, there are some particular passages that I have an interest in, a different take on its translation. I was wondering if we might get together over drinks and you could help me through them.
I think that would be most enjoyable, yes. If you point them out now, I might be able to take a look at them before our conversation.
Yeah, so you guys get sort of lost in him pointing out different passages, and he'll be like, this is my understanding, and then you can give a Latin roll, actually.
Ooh, nice.
Nice.
Check mark.
I found languages were so hard to find the right balance on leveling up and not.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, you guys, so it'll fade with you kind of looking at different passages that he points out, and we'll bounce over to Whitmire, who finds himself most engaged in conversation with Logan Terry, Sergeant Logan Terry, a police officer here in Boston.
Is this like an interrogation?
A little bit.
You're in a room. There's a mirror.
Let me shift him up here. He has a brusque manner and he's sort of abrasive. And actually, the moment he was sat down with you, he's kind of given you the suspicious eye, as though he smells the stink of a criminal on you or some such. And the way he broaches conversation, he asks you, now, don't I know you? I feel like I've seen you elsewhere around Boston. What's your occupation?
I'm into import-export business.
Vanderlei Industries. Shipping?
Yeah.
Import-export. So what brings you to our little fraternal order?
Well, I done some work for Mr. Merriweather in the past, and he invited me to join, as I'm already a member of the I can't ever remember the name of that one, the exploration.
Oh, right.
One.
You can say the SEU.
Yeah, so I'm already a member of the SEU.
No, import-exports. I don't think I met anybody like you. I think I know where I saw somebody that looked like you. Were you... I think it must have been 2 years ago, you were hanging out over at Dean or Drew's gambling hall, weren't you? And this is kind of shocking because Drew's gambling hall isn't like a name that's out on the marquee or something like that. Like I described, it's the place you just visited in the basement.
Yeah, I'm going to try a fast talk. Like,
Okay.
See if I can get out of this.
No, it always fails you, man.
I know. I haven't hit one of these yet, and it was supposed to be one of my best skills.
So just relax. You think if I were in here busting bootleggers, I wouldn't already be doing it? And he takes a big drink of his Scotch whiskey there, and he's like, cheers.
I guess, what do they have? Because I don't drink.
Oh, you get tea or punch?
Whatever it is. It was all kind of heavily sweating at this point.
I think the last time you ordered a drink, you got like a club soda.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
but yeah, I'll ask him, how long he's been busting heads down at Drew's. Then,
I have not been busting heads down there. I send other people to do it. But I just want to know where everybody stands. Let's keep it honest from here on out.
That sounds good
Agree?
to me.
So what do I see you in Boston again for? What are you up to now? Besides imports, exports.
Well, I'll ask him if he's familiar with the death of Mr. Dooley. Then
Give me a psychology roll.
How does that work out? Is the one skill that I have at the highest, I fail, and everything else is good?
Yeah, you didn't fail by much.
So yeah, his eyes widen, and he tries to cover the expression on his face by pretending to splutter on his drink as he takes a drink. And he's like, "Oh, pardon me. What, Mr. Dooley? Oh yes, been in the papers. Not my precinct though. Only what I've read in the papers."
Yeah, I'll clap him on the back and tell him, must have went down the wrong pipe. And
Indeed.
But I will tuck that information away that he might know something, because I'm not going to try and exploit it here, though.
Why are you asking about it?
Yeah, I'll tell him that it's something that we were asked, or I was asked to take a look at, just because it's after that business in Peru, maybe they think I'm an expert on this stuff, but I'm looking at it, it scares the hell out of me.
So he sets his drink down very carefully, and his demeanor and his gaze becomes fixed on you, and he has a deadly serious expression, and he seems to savor the words as he says them. Who asked you to look into it?
What was the name of the detective that had the journal?
Nichols.
No, the other one, not the one that hired us. His partner.
Oh, Fallon, Detective Fallon.
Yeah, that's who I'm going to say.
Detective Fallon asked you that?
Yeah, me and Fallon, we go way back.
Go ahead and give me a fast talk roll on that one.
There
All
you
right.
go.
There you go.
Almost failed it.
That was close.
He picks his drink up and he offers it as a toast again, and he's like, "To Detective Fallon."
I was all, clink my glass with him and, take a drink watching him.
Worked with him a little bit. Good fella. But after that toast, and he excuses himself, but not without a very pointed look at you, and then he exits the dining room.
Okay.
And we will actually close the scene and the session on his suspicious
Abrupt
look
exit.
at Mr. Whitmire. Thanks for playing, guys.
Hell yeah, man.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
it was a lot of fun.
Oh,
Thank
man.
you, Chris. My showdown with Mueller on our knowledges was a lot of fun.
He'll get you next time.
So I mean to do this at the end of the session so we can actually get those luck increase. This has been a Death Watch production. Thank you for listening.